Four, three, two, one. Welcome back. You're watching the Press Club with me, Kendall Burton and Earl Bruski. We're talking about the stories making the news this week. One of the stories that didn't make the news was the Emancipation holiday or observance. Very low-key, very under the radar, and it seems like it's getting increasingly that way every year.
Well, I'm not sure that celebration of Emancipation Day holiday on the 1st of August has ever been as associated with emancipation as we would have liked. I always make the point that everybody looks forward to August 1st being a holiday, and when you ask them, what's the holiday about, you know, they'll just tell you Emancipation Day, but go into what is emancipation and what was it, that is hardly known. And having participated in a panel discussion that was rebroadcast on the issue, there were some other small Emancipation Day events. There was a walk in Beaufort that was called off. There was a lecture at Fond Jean Libre, you know, about the area and the experience of the slaves in that part of the country. There were other activities organized, but nothing national in scope. And I think that short of the panel discussion that was broadcast live for about 5 or 6 days, coming out of it and individual efforts by persons calling to radio stations, hosts of programs discussing the issue, what I think has come out, thankfully, is that as a result of this Emancipation Day, the issue of CARICOM's approach to and request for reparations has now hit home, insofar as people knowing that there is the move. But having said so, one can also say that not sufficient has been done. So with a National Reparations Committee, which is going to be meeting next week to decide on its future, what is necessary with these national reparation committees, like in St. Lucia, is to promote throughout the year, not only at Emancipation Day, but throughout the year, discussion around reparations. And what is important, as I keep saying, is that as the thing is, it's just like racism. Some of us think all white people are foolish and racist. Some of us think all white people are just equal human beings. But we're all in the debate. And I think the reparations, there are some who believe we should have it, some who believe we should not, some who believe it's a good idea but we'll never get it, some who wonder why should we want people who did not practice and implement slavery to make reparations for what their great-grandfathers did. So I'm saying let's put all of these discussions, and I hate to hear when somebody who considers themselves knowledgeable would say to somebody else who made a comment, oh, you're a fool, or you're backward. We have to learn to, you know, people say what they believe. You know, and whatever somebody will say, if a woman calls, like one called my program to say, listen, she's not sure this reparation thing is going to go far because she's black, but she could trace white blood in her family. So how is she going to call herself African? And somebody else call and say, you know, she's backward because it's just a little bit of white blood. You know, and I'm saying we need to understand that following our discussion on the radio, the lady was in a better position to understand why the claim can still be made. So sometimes when we hear people say something that we either don't agree with or know not to be the reality, we have to understand that the person is only saying what they know and what they believe in, and see that as an opportunity to enter into a discussion with them, to share our own views rather than just plastering it in their face. Because if you're going to tell a person she's backward, you push her off. You know, so I think what we need to do to close on this reparations discussion is that we have to see reparations and repatriation and emancipation and all of that as not as a seasonal something for the 1st of August, because as you and I know, 1st of August holiday, the big things in St. Lucia was launching of the Splash Water Park, you know, the Pork Festival, you know, it's also another excuse to have another party.
Yeah, but do you get the sense that we are still ashamed of our past? And so every opportunity we have, you know, to crowd a day like August 1st with other activities that have nothing to do or aren't associated with emancipation or slavery in any way will always take precedence.
There's a view that it is as a result of us being ashamed of our past. I don't agree, because I think we could only be ashamed of our past if we know it.
We know it, yeah.
And if we know our past, we cannot be ashamed of it, because we didn't choose to. We didn't choose slavery. Our ancestors didn't choose, you know, to be uprooted and sent over here. Our grandfathers and grandmothers didn't choose to be trying to adapt with a system where the chains had been moved from their feet to their pockets, you know, and their minds. So I think that the reason why we have that is not because we are ashamed of our past, but simply because we will continue as St. Lucia to look for every single reason to have a good time. Because I think, subject to correction, I don't think that tendency to party in hard times is as prevalent in neighboring islands as it is here.
It's not. But the same people I had from St. Vincent, so down to Grosley, I was telling about the Friday party, and you could not believe that we have a Friday party every single Friday. You should have passed them
by the market.
No, because all these St. Lucians are really happy.
Yeah, and they believe we have the money.
Yeah.
You know, now it's either we have it, because it's evident by us, you know, fellas having 2 and 3 bears in their hand at the same time, or we don't have it, but we know how to get it. Because at the end of the day, you could either go out and have a good time or don't, and we choose to do.
But I want to talk about the fact that the point that you just made, for us to be ashamed of it or proud of it, we have to know it. To what degree are we teaching our local history, our Caribbean history in the school system? Is the emancipation celebration just limited to national public events, or should we organize, you know, events at the school level
and the community
level?
That is
that highlights, you know, the not just the bad aspects of slavery, but the fact that we've emerged from it and what we have become, that we have to be proud of. You know, even the media. What's the role of the media? DBS, for instance. I work here. How many black movies did we show on that day? How many panel discussions did we air? How many documentaries did we show on that day?
Yeah, I think it's a general reflection of the society that we grew up. I mean, Emancipation Day is 180 years old. You know, and we grew up at school having Emancipation Day holiday, but there was nothing in the curriculum, nothing in our history books except Wilberforce. Now, it's an important issue that I also raised on my radio program. To know our history, we have to dig for our roots. And when we do, the deeper we dig, the more roots we get. What we need to be able to do is to not see it within the context of going back, like people say, going back to Africa, meaning that you board a plane or a boat and go back, but understanding that those roots have grown a tree with leaves and branches of which we are part. And therefore, if the reporters, the publishers, the editors, as you correctly pointed out, if the only way they would dedicate those programs to the designated dates is if they know and understand why and how. There's also the other aspect to it. I mentioned that the Star had a supplement on emancipation. I'm not sure that the political ideological orientation of the Star publisher would lend itself to celebration of emancipation. But it provided the opportunity to have a supplement. And lots of newspapers and media houses see Emancipation Day as an opportunity to have a supplement where we slapdash everything that's related to it with no specific intent except to attract the advertising.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's good in that too, because I was able to see some stories in the Star that I hadn't seen elsewhere, including what I consider a ridiculous story about not because it wasn't written by the Star, but it was a story I was glad to see, because it was showing that in the efforts to debase the reparations movement, we mustn't think Europe is sitting down there and waiting, you know, for us to just come at them. They have their people out there showing how this thing not making sense. So this particular article was taking issue with the number of slaves who had died in slavery. And I was saying, when you look at the figures and you make an analysis in terms of sexual relations and production of children by the slaves and so on, he's saying that we overestimated the number of persons who died, because the life of a slave in those days was up to 40 years or up to 30 years.
The expectancy.
Life expectancy. And it was an article which could easily swerve the untrained mind, because it skillfully made a modern analysis of old figures, you know, and it engaged in what I call statistical demagoguery. But me having 45 years of following this, I was able to see through it. But there's a lot of that out there. There was, in a panel discussion, interestingly, one fellow made the point. He said that the first slave ship registered to have taken slaves out of Africa to the Caribbean, the captain was a man named Gonzalez, who was a paternal, you know, ancestor of Ralph Gonzalez.
It's a favorite, I saw that.
Yeah, and I'm saying, okay, so what isn't it good that that descendant of the first slave ship captain is now leading the charge for reparations against the country from which his father emerged? You know, similarly, there are those in the political opposition and those who are opposed to Kenny Anthony and would like to blame him for being the son or coming from the Barnard family, which has had its own history in terms of how it has treated the people on its estates. And to say that because Kenny's father and family are not the type of people that he is promoting today, that Kenny is a wolf in sheep clothing, I ask, you know, is it wrong now for Kenny and Ralph Gonzalez to be the ones leading the reparation movement in the Caribbean? Do we hold their past against them? And then the interesting question of Senator Tobier, her name being a French name that can be traced to certain things of the past. Is it fair to her to say to her today is that, listen, all these things you all have acquired, your great-grandfathers didn't work for that. They exploited our great-grandparents, so give it to us. Can't be fair, because, you know, it wasn't her. And that's not what it's about. The reparations issue is not to take back, you know, or to demand. It is to get Europe to do three things. One, recognize and accept that slavery existed as the greatest crime against humanity known to humankind. We secondly understand and accept that there are certain factors in the Caribbean of the Caribbean experience that can be traced back to slavery, like the fact that in the case of St. Lucia, where we have been designated by PAHO and the World Health Organization as a country with the highest level of diabetes per head of population in the entire world, diabetes and hypertension have been identified by medical scientists of having had a relationship to slavery. And type 2 diabetes, the entire Caribbean, folks, the entire Caribbean is the place in the world with the highest level of type 2 diabetes, and that is directly traced. So CARICOM has identified 6 areas You know, the fact that we have been deculturalized, we don't know our culture, we have been miseducated, you know, we don't have the health facilities. 6 areas have been identified, and what we say in Europe is come and admit those things and help us overcome them. When you come to that conclusion, then we will decide how it is done. And then we'll tell you it's not a bunch of, you know, African descendants trying to rob the treasury or trying to get you to give us what is not ours, but to get you to have a new relationship that is based on mutual respect, acceptance of what has happened, and the need today to have truth and reconciliation.
Okay, we're due for a break. We take the break. When we come back, more Press Club.